We'd like to welcome everyone to the Culture of Agriculture, sponsored by Spudnik Equipment. I am Brent Rigby. I'll be your host today, and we have Mike Metzger, who is the Vice President of Agriculture and Resource for MinnDak Farmers Cooperative. Mike, we're sure glad to have you with us today. Excited to hear a little bit kind of how things are going out in the North Dakota and in that region of what you're covering, and give us a little bit of information. I'd like also if you could tell us a little of your background and a little bit of the company background. I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can start with the company. So MinnDak Farmers Cooperative was formed in 1972. And as such, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And most people don't know it, but MinnDak is the very first grower-owned Sugarbeet cooperative in the United States. So we're number one in that regard, and have probably been in business, like I said, for 50 years. Very strong company, raised about 70,000 acres of sugar beets from that early 70s all the way up until the early 90s. At that point in time, the company decided it was time to expand its footprint a little bit. And we added about another 30 to 40,000 acres on. And that was done in the process of expanding our processing capacity in the factory, expanding the ventilation and long-term storage infrastructure that we've had. And since we've grown in the mid-90s, we've kind of maintained that 105 to anywhere up to 120,000 acres of beets on any given year on an annual basis. So yeah, we farm and operate in a very unique part of the world in that it's very cold here. And man, I'm about the only one smiling when we have a week of temperatures that don't get any higher than -5. That's just fantastic beet storage weather. And it's that climate where we operate that allows us to process as long as we do. I mean, we have processing campaigns out here that are anywhere from 275 to up to 290 days. We've had some that have extended into the 300-day mark. Wow. But we don't like to do that. Yeah, that makes it tough. But yeah, 280, 285 days is not out of the norm for operating for us. Yeah. Yep.
And that's very interesting. That does give you quite a bit of time to get through that crop.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's interesting. The growers spend 3-4 months raising the crop here, and then they deliver it, and then it sits in purgatory for the next 8 or 9 months, really beyond that, just depending on the season. So it's kind of interesting how we are literally dealing with it year round.
Boy, you're not kidding. You get used to not seeing that. Usually they process through the beets pretty quick just because of that. Storage wise. So when it's colder during the winter, you actually have a better storage period of time with that than if you have a mild winter.
Absolutely. And we're very, very heavily ventilated at MinnDak. About 70% of our crop is put on what we consider active ventilation. So we're physically moving air, mechanically moving air through that pile. And yeah, just depending upon when that particular pile or storage receiving station is scheduled to be processed, that depends whether we kind of chill it down or we take her down to single digits if we can.
When did you start the air going through? I mean, that's been just in the last 10 years, or has that been, you guys have been working on that for quite a while?
Oh, we've been working on that for quite a while. The process of moving air through beets to promote their storability, if that's a word, and that's nothing new. That's been going on, in potatoes for a long time, and then we just kind of pirated their success with it. And American Crystal was the first one to kind of put it on beets, and they did that. Oh, but gosh, that was the mid 80s when they started doing that. Our first ventilation kind of came to be in the early 90s, and then we rapidly expanded it during our factory and company expansion in that mid 90s. And really it came down to economics. It's one of two things. We wanted to raise more sugar beets in this area. It was very good for our shareholders. And you can do it in one of two ways. You can drop a massive capital bomb at the factory and really expand your processing capacity, or you can put these goofy culverts underneath your piles and extend their shelf life. And that was certainly a cheaper option to go. Again, we live in the climate to let that happen. So that's when it really, for us, kind of rapidly took off. And like I said, just shy of 70% of our stuff goes on pipe. And I'm just trying to think here, the last few years, in the last decade, we've probably taken Brent, we've taken our active ventilation from probably 50% to that 70% that is now.
So it's proved to be quite beneficial then to do that.
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely.
And that's what I've noticed interesting. We've just started seeing that out west in our area. The ventilation has just kind of started, and I can see it. It looks like they're expanding that a little bit more too. So with that capability of being able to process longer, not shove them through.
Right, absolutely. And it's even beyond that, not only on the storage part of it, but just in being able to control the respiration that's going on in the plant. So for a lot of people don't know this, but when we the storage starts as soon as the growers deliver it. And what I mean by that is we are actively managing those beets from the time they're delivered until the time we dump them into the factory. And that's kind of where our egg world ends. That's somebody else's area, the business beyond that. But anytime that beets are piled on ventilation and the internal root temperature is or the ambient air temperature is cooler than that internal root temperature, we have the fans running. And we actively start bringing that pile cooler and cooler throughout even the harvest season. And for us, it's about respiration. When beets are in storage, and we use kind of that 40 degrees as our benchmark, they are burning through 1/2 pound of sugar per ton of beets per day. That's what they're actually doing. So when you take a look at one of our storage piles that we have, and you take a look at, depending where the selling price is for sugar, we just kind of use, that's about $15,000 a day per pile that is just actively being burned, just disappearing. And you could argue that's the cost of doing business, but it is still something that we can control and minimize that risk. So that is why we are ventilated to the level we are currently, and why it's scrutinized and actively managed so closely, because it's just millions of dollars for us.
Yeah, man, that translates into a lot of money that I guess as a guy looking from the outside in, you don't realize that. In fact, probably didn't get realized really up until about the last 20 some odd years.
Well, that's exactly.
They didn't really calculate.
Right. And, we have 22 piles in the system. So when you start thinking about, until we get all those beets below that 27 degrees Fahrenheit where respiration ceases, for us, that's $300,000 a day. $300,000 a day we're losing in sugar just by having that respiration there. And then respiration, that amount of respiration doubles. Don't quote me on this. I think it's something like every 16 or 18 degrees, somewhere in that range. It doubles. So, actively cooling those plants is really paying for itself. And the pipe, we call it pipe, but the active ventilation, oh my gosh, that investment by our shareholders has paid for itself many, many, many times over.
Yeah, that sounds like pretty quick. You'll about have 100% under that with that figure.
Oh yeah. Yep.
What are you seeing this year as far as the have you started beet harvest, or you're just sounds like you're getting going?
Yeah. We're in our early harvest. So for us, kind of around that Labor Day, give or take a week on either side. As of late, it's been really in the August side. We start our early harvest period. And again, like I alluded to before, early harvest for the ag guy is a juggling act between Mother Nature, a voluntary-based grower delivery system, and the factory slice. So how many tons are running through a day. And all three have to work in harmony for us to really have a handle on it. So it is a little bit stressful time. You want to keep just enough beets on the ground so that they don't spoil at 80 degrees. And then, but at the same time, at one rain event, you can run out of beets or have too many depending on inventory level. So yeah, it's a juggling act. And the good news is it only lasts about 6 weeks. And during that time period, we keep just enough beets on the ground to keep the factory running at full capacity. And for us in doing that, we take out about 12 to 14% of the crop on any given year. So it just kind of kickstart our processing capacity, and that's considered in that 280, 285 days we kind of shoot for. When October 1 rolls around, and we always say at or near October 1, that's when usually Mother Nature provides temperatures that are conducive to put the beets into long-term storage. And then we open the floodgates and we start bringing in the crop as quickly and as safely as we can put it to bed.
You bet. Get it in. So let's maybe start at the first of this year. What were some of the challenges or some of the pluses that you saw this spring? And then we'll just kind of work through the growing season. But what were some of the things that worked out good this spring? Because I knew we were a little wet early on, had some challenges there, little cool spring getting started.
It was. So for us, our average planting date is right around that May 3, May 4. That's what we normally see every year. And typically, beets that are put in ahead of that are a little bit better. Beets are put in a little behind that aren't. And so this year for us, 75% of our beets were put in after the 20th of May. So, we were 3 weeks behind what we would consider an average planting date. And just to kind of wrap some significance around that, Brent, on average, for every week beyond May 12th, May 12th is our kind of statistical line in the sand. For every week the beets are put in beyond May 12th, we see $120 per acre per week hit to the grower. And, so a 500 acre grower, that's $60,000 for doing nothing but not being able to get that crop in the ground. So when we start talking, 2 weeks beyond that date, it's significant. It's big time significant.
Yep.
And people always say, well, why in the world is that? Well, it's because of that at or around October 1st. In the Red River Valley, when the weather can change so quickly here, that when Mother Nature gives us an opportunity to put beets into long-term storage, we have to take it. The risk on the tail end of delaying and trying to hedge that bet a little bit, it's just far too great. One hard frost and we can't store them anymore. And, half of the grower's livelihood is still out in the field. So when we talk about, that 2 weeks beyond our average planting date and getting most, the lion's share of our acres in there, we've got that $250 an acre already working against us. And that's significant. It's significant. Yeah. So we're and for every day that calendar turns, you're just closing that grower window a little bit. So our guys started off behind the 8 ball right away, which is kind of the rough spring. Then those that were able to get stuff in, it was not all roses. We had pounding rains, which causes issue with crusting. Then you get that soil silt separation, and anytime the wind blows, you start shearing off beets. That was tough. Coming off a bit of a mild winter, and then having the beets delayed planting, now they are still what I would consider infants when the insects normally emerge, when our soil-borne diseases normally emerge. And that really is the difference. The analogy I use is giving pneumonia to an infant or a robust 18-year-old. The 18-year-old is going to be able to weather it and handle it, a lot better. And so it was kind of a rough start for the class of 2022. They really didn't get their feet underneath them until about the end of June. And at that point, then it kind of started drying out, and we didn't really have much of I wouldn't say a drought, but it wasn't very easy to come by rain all summer. Yep.
Fairly dry.
Yep. Fairly dry. Yep. Now, that being all said, I painted this awful picture of doom and gloom. I've been doing beets my entire life, and in my experience with them, they always never cease to amaze me what that crop can do. And we talked about the awful, the hardships they had at start, being delayed planting. All of those hardships gave us plant populations that are less than ideal or less where we want to see. And yet I can sit here and tell you that we're looking at a crop estimated to be in that 24 to 25 ton range, which with everything I've talked about is a high five, chest bumping number. It's not that 30 ton we strive for, but my gosh, to be talking about 6 ton off that mark with everything else, it blows my mind what the crop can do in such a short period of time.
It's amazing what Mother Nature can do to catch up.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's kind of like once you get those beets started, it's as long as they get a little bit of water, things keep moving. It's just that early start on beets. It's really critical, isn't it?
Yeah.
So ground prep, I mean, when you talk about doing ground prep in the spring, what special things or what things do you see that are important for that?
Well, it's not so much in the spring. It's more for us with the rotational crops we have is the ground prep in the fall.
Okay.
And year in and year out, guys that follow the guys that have the small grains ahead of sugar beets, hands down, from a yield and quality standpoint, they have the advantage. And that all is attributed back to fall preparation. They get the wheat crop off early enough that ground can get worked once, at a minimum, twice, usually, and it's a gorgeous seed bed come springtime. Yep. So we've seen over the last decade, we've seen a bit of a decline in the small grain acreage that we have in our sugar beet rotation. And now, the last 3-4 years, that has really kind of started a significant uptick again, which is good for the company. Yep. It is. And then as far as spring prep goes, everyone's got their own secret method on what they want to use. For the guys with the corn stalks, the vertical tillage equipment for us has been a really good thing, getting that trash kind of broken up. And the reality is a lot of these guys, if it's an early frost, they don't get the corn ground worked like it should. So, I mean, we're dealing with that kind of trash and high volumes in the spring. But the vertical tillage has been a good one. One thing that we've found too and have adopted very, probably 2/3 of our growers do it, and the rest are on corn ground, is just having some type of trash on top to hold those little plants down and kind of help them nurse along. Or the other 2/3, like I had mentioned, that specifically following small grains or soybeans, will put down a nurse crop. So they'll go out and they'll seed 1/3 of a bushel of barley at the time the fertilizer spring applied and get that established. Grows faster than the beets, helps use up a lot of that excess nitrogen that's there, especially following the beans and the corn. And I can't tell you the benefit or explain how beneficial that is to your sugar beet crop, having a nurse crop growing alongside it. It just kind of, it's like training wheels, kid riding a bike with training wheels. It just gets it up and gets it off and running in the direction, and pretty soon they can come off and they're on their own.
Yeah, it kind of helps with the weather, the severe wind and all that kind of stuff. It just kind of babies it along then.
Yep, very much so. Very much so.
That's very interesting. So cover crop, you kind of talked a little bit about a cover crop. Very important.
It is. We the cover crop, we use them interchangeably. To us, a cover crop and a nurse crop is something that's spring planted, that's going to be reared with the sugar beets and then terminated when the beets are 6-8 leaf. That's kind of what we do. We have a few guys that do in the valley here that do use what many would consider a true cover crop, and it's a fall seeded rye, and they put that in. Yep, after the crop comes off in the fall, they usually seed it in strips. So we have strips of rye that they put down, and then we'll offset their planter, 11 or 15 inches, whatever their row spacing is, and then interseed beets into it in the spring and terminate the rye early, but the carcass still sits there until that point that the beets are able to fend for themselves. Yeah, it's not a common practice, but with some of the government programs that are out now, especially surrounding sustainability, we see that becoming, it's not as uncommon as it used to be.
Yep. Used to be just one here and there, but now you're seeing it come along a little bit more.
Yeah. Used to be a few of our Fruit Loops out west, trying this thing, and they made it work. I tip of the hat to them. They made it work, but now it's catching on a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. What is your average spacing that you see in your growers? I know out our way, we do a lot of 22-inch spacing, but what is the spacing and kind of the plant population that you're after?
So for for us, 25% of our crop is on 22-inch rows. Or actually, back that up. 75% of our crop is on 22-inch rows. The other 25% is actually on 30-inch rows. We've got a lot of 30-inch rows out here. For the 22-inch guys, our recommendation year in and year out is for them to shoot for a 4.5-inch seed spacing. That's 63,000 plants per acre and some change. That's what we want them to strive for. For the 30-inch guys, we cut that down by an inch. We want them to be at 3.5-inch, and that puts them 58,000 somewhere in there. Yep.
Okay. And do you see a big yield difference between the 30 and the 22, or?
Not so much yield difference, but quality difference.
Quality.
I can sit here and put my hand on the Bible and tell you that a grower that, with everything else being equal, a grower that has beets planted on 22-inch rows typically will see anywhere from 400 to 600 pounds of sugar per acre advantage for having that spacing. It is significant. Yep. So then you beg the question, why in the world do we have so many 30-inch guys? Well, we have a couple families that are pretty sizable growers, and if one brother switches, they all got to switch, because then they can't help themselves and share equipment. And the operations are large enough too that just, oh my gosh, the tire cost alone to swap everything over is just mind-boggling. So they make it work. They're doing everything right, following the small grains. They're putting the right amount of seed in the ground. They're following our fertility guidelines, and they make it work. But yeah, it's like I said, on average about 500 pounds an acre in sugar.
And sure, that's quite drastic.
Oh
but
yeah,
like you say, when you're on like the corn and soybeans and all that kind of stuff, if they're set up on 30, it is hard to go back and forth.
It is. It's really hard to go back and forth. And we don't typically. The farm's set up on either 22s or 30s for everything, and beets included.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. I could see that. Summer growing condition, as you went through, we talked a little bit. It was a little dry, but we kind of came up with probably a little bit more heat unit and a little cooler temps going through the summer, and then kind of hit hot temps towards the end. Is that?
Yeah, that's kind of what we saw. And, for us, again, that what we were worried about is the late planting, getting the beets established. And really what you want to do is we were harvesting the sun. That's what we're doing. And we want the beets to get, the most solar radiation we get in the Red River Valley comes in that end of June, all of July, and first part of August. And we want those leaves or those solar panels, laying out there as much as we can, collecting that sunlight. And so it was really getting about that. And Mother Nature did. It was a nice summer. Warm, sunny, way ahead on not so much GDUs for the crop ahead, but yeah, just the solar radiation from that standpoint. It was nice. Really, the first significant rain that we saw. Of course, we were starting beet harvest, so why wouldn't it rain? It hasn't rained all summer. As soon as we need to move equipment into the field, harvest the root crop, then it starts raining on us. But just came off a fairly significant rain event this last weekend here in our southern part. Rained pretty good yesterday in our northern district, and we've got another one scheduled for Friday. So it's kind of weird seeing dark clouds in the west. It's something we haven't been accustomed to.
You've got used to the sunshine this year.
Yeah. One thing that was a little unique about our growing season that has been a real battle for us the last few years has been surpassed for leaf spot, and that by far has been our biggest agronomic challenge the last 5-7 years. Hands down has been. It's been just awful and running rampant here. Last year was the first year where we introduced some genetics by KWS that had something called CR+. And it's not an immunity, but it's a highly tolerant trait that is bred into those varieties that is meant to supplement the fungicides and not replace them, supplement them. And the combination of a good fungicide program utilizing those genetic traits has been wonderful for our growers. We kind of dipped our toe last year, and roughly about 60% of the varieties we had planted in the co-op had that trait. And they did exactly what they're supposed to. It worked so well that this year we're 96% CR plus across the co-op. And again, our guys are still spraying them, 4 times. And that combination of the drier summer, them being diligent on their fungicide program, and then utilizing the technology that's bred into those genetics, it's really hard to find sarcospora lesions out here. And as such, we're seeing excellent quality being delivered, even in early harvest.
Well, that's exciting. On that
It
part.
is. It's been a good thing for our co-op.
Has, as far as the seed on those varieties that you've got, plenty of opportunity to get that seed, or is it kind of limited, or?
No, we had to limit it last year a little bit just on availability, and then limited to the point where to make sure every grower has the ability to use that technology if they so choose. So just kind of parceling out that way. This year, we had unlimited sales on several varieties that had that trait bred into it. And yeah, it was, if you wanted it and wanted to use it, it was available.
That is good. So through the cooperative, do they help fund some of that research, for different varieties, or as far as getting a variety that does this, do they help?
So yes, the easy answer is yes. The trait was developed by KWS, and that's marketed here as Beta and Crystal, or ACH brand beet seed, American Crystal Robles, yeah, but ACH seeds and Beta seed. We've got a very good relationship, our internal, or MinnDak does, with KWS and those two brands specifically. And as such, we partnered with them on several of the fungicide trials where they provided the seed, and then we ran trials along, our internal research department ran trials alongside other markets and their research departments where this stuff was going to be launched, and did that ahead of actually the commercial launch. So we had a basis for a fungicide program to release to the growers in place. And so, yeah, I mean, they're very good to work with, and they want to see this trait succeed just as much as we do. Because it is, for as well as it works, we know it can be fairly fragile. And growers have a funny way of taking technology, and 10 years later, look at Roundup, look at the amount of resistant weeds that we have, right?
Exactly. Yes.
We're just using that model, how fragile some of this new technology can be, right off the get-go, because compared to where we were, losing, 2-3 percentage points of sugar and probably 4 or 5 ton yield off the top from a leaf disease, we don't ever want to go back there.
No. Yeah, and that gets into the whole part. You got to grow more acres to get what you need at the facility. And they don't want to grow more acres because it's costing more to grow those. So
it is. Beets are they're a specialty crop. We often forget that. Compared to corn and beans, they are a specialty crop, and they take a lot more time, attention, and inputs than anything else they have in the rotation.
Yes, man. The other thing, I guess, a little bit, talk a little bit about your cooperative, kind of how it works. I know when we first started, you talked about it's a grower-owned cooperative. Do they buy into that, or do you have any acres that somebody else can jump in, or is it kind of you're maxed where you're at, and if somebody sells those acres, how do you kind of work through that?
Sure. So we are a grower-owned cooperative, have been from the get-go. And again, I will say first one in the nation. We're very proud of that. So at MinnDak, in order to raise sugar beets, you have to either own shares or rent the rights to those shares. So that's the only two way. We are a closed cooperative.
Okay.
Those that own shares, that's self-explanatory. If you have a share in your name, you have an obligation to the cooperative to plant a minimum amount of acres and not to exceed a maximum amount of acres. And that's determined by the board of directors every year. So this year, for example, you Brent, if you were a shareholder in our cooperative, you had an obligation to plant a minimum of 1.37 acres per share and not to exceed a maximum of 1.43 acres per share. Yep,
Okay.
that's the range. And that we provide that range. So on your farm, it allows you to finish off a field. That's the biggest thing. So you don't have to have 4 acres of a quarter section put into beets to meet that minimum. It allows our growers a little bit of flexibility that way. Yep. So that's your obligation. Now, let's say you are an older shareholder and you'd like to retire from farming, or you know, you lost a little bit of rented ground this year, and you're not going to have the space that you normally do to put the beets in. We allow the rental of shares. So you could come into an agreement with me, as an example, as to rent shares, and I could be an existing shareholder, or I could be someone brand new to the cooperative. And as long as I meet the criteria to be a shareholder for MinnDak, and that the criteria is the same for renting or owning, I can rent those shares from you and plant that crop in your stead. Basically what it is, and have the same obligation to the cooperative. Now, what's interesting is in order to maintain compliant with the Capper-Volstead Act, I have to have, as the renter, I have to be actively engaged in farming, and you, as the rentee, if you will, have to have that same. So we do not allow any cash transactions between the co-op. All of our rental agreements are on a percentage base. So we come up with the agreement that I am going to rent the shares, let's say, for 20%. Okay, that's what we agree on. We let the co-op know of our arrangement, and when the check comes out at the end of the year, you get 20% of it. I get the other 80%. And your success or failure is based upon how I perform as a farmer. If I'm a good guy, you're going to make more money. If I'm a complete clown, I probably wouldn't rent to me again. And that's how the relationship works. So you are actively engaged and benefit or fail based on my performance of those acres that I am renting from you.
Well, that's very interesting. So, like you say, as some of the, say, older guys get to where they're not doing the farming anymore, then they will always hold those shares till they pass, or does that eventually change to somebody else? If they're
we don't have a sunset on age, so some of it does go into the past, and then gets dispersed amongst the heirs. As long as they are actively engaged in farming, that's where it goes. What we do have as part of the stipulation is you have to have a residence of operation within 30 miles of any of our receiving stations. So, for example, I'm a longtime shareholder in the company. I die at the ripe old age of 99, and my only heirs live in Minneapolis. The company is going to recognize that and not allow them to be shareholders unless they move back here. At that time, the company has a procedure to acquire those shares back from the family and then reallocate them to someone that would fit the qualification. So all shareholders have to live within live or have the base of operation within 30 miles of the receiving station. Yeah, so that keeps them local.
Yes, it does, and that keeps your grower group together in that too. It
does. Yep, exactly. Yep.
So no, that's great. Looking through, and we'll just kind of to wrap things up. What do you kind of look forward to this fall? I know weather. Hopefully, we have a good weather going into the middle of October, so we can get these things out. Give us a little bit of what your thought is for fall and coming in to finish the year out with these things.
Yeah, this is our Super Bowl. I mean, this for me is kind of the best time of the year. It's kind of neat in agriculture. When we high five and chest bump, it's not the lower right hand corner of a spreadsheet that's slid across the desk. It's physically seeing how big those piles are, and knowing that you were part of that from the time they selected the seed and put that into the ground. So I mean, it is really it's a neat experience that a guy can't really explain unless you're part of the system. So that is, I'm really looking forward to that. Our ag staff here at MinnDak has a huge responsibility this time of year, and for us, safety of our employees and for that of those that are involved in the harvest operation is paramount, and that that's what keeps me up at night more than Mother Nature, is just making sure that our 300 plus harvest employees are doing it safely. We don't have control of the truck drivers that the farmers hire, but we do everything we can to educate them and to just make it a smooth process. And I say truck drivers, Lucy, they are not truck drivers. They are people who drive a truck for 3 weeks out of the year. There's a difference, right?
Yep.
And year in and year out, we manage to get it done. And if we can get it done where everyone goes home at night and does it in a safe manner, that's the successful part of it.
Yes,
it is. The other thing is Mother Nature. I alluded to how quickly she can turn, and Mother Nature is a cruel mistress at times. So it is intense when she gives us the weather to put them to bed in a manner where I know they'll store. We have to take advantage of it. So, and at times that's not 24 hours a day. That's very fragmented. And it's not fair to everyone in their eyes that, the PM crew got to run 2 hours longer than the AM crew and all manner of personnel out there, a lot of armchair quarterbacks on how to run it. And our staff does the best job we can, for the good of the company, not necessarily the individual grower. And that's sometimes hard to get that point of view across. But the grower is the company. And when the company succeeds, the grower succeeds. And it's just going into that, that approach and that mindset, especially this time of year when everyone's tired, emotions are a little more raw. Keeping that in mind can be difficult at times for a grower and for ag staff.
Oh, for everybody that's involved in that part of it. Yep. You work some hard, long hours, and it gets a little bit intense at times.
Yeah, and people are passionate about their kids. They're equally as passionate about sugar beets.
Yes, they are. When it comes to harvest, I always made that comment. When it comes to harvest, we're pretty serious.
Oh, it is. And some of these guys, they are the nicest, and I say this in jest, but I mean, really, they are the nicest people 11 months out of the year. And come beet harvest, they'd run over their own grandmother to get another load of sugar beets across the scale before we button her up for the day. So it's managing all of that chaos.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, Mike, we sure appreciate your time today. I know you're busy and trying to keep things rolling, and I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to come and join us and be with us and give us a little information. We're excited to hear about that area there in the Red River Valley, and it's always fun to learn about each area because each area's got a little different. You might grow sugar beets in Idaho or Michigan or wherever, but each area has its challenges, and it's fun to kind of see that and listen to that. So it is. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, absolutely. And for just as many, so for you could list 9 or 10 items that were completely polarized on, that they do it way different. Irrigation. There isn't an acre in Idaho that doesn't have irrigation on it. I can think off the top of my head, out of the 1,200 fields we have for MinnDak, I think 2 have pivots on it that comes to the top of my head. So we're so different that way. Yet, but when I can sit down and visit with any member of the amalgamated staff, whether it's Brody or Oliver on the research or whatever, there's so many commonalities between it. It's such a tight knit and close industry that we've got that going for us as well.
Yes, indeed. And like you say, you schedule your irrigation much better than we do in Idaho. So you just have it done.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have no idea how I would love to just turn off the rain and just look forward to a dry harvest and know that's coming.
Well, and then the bad part is we have the irrigation. We try to turn it off and then it shows up. So
yeah. Point taken. Yeah.
Well, we wish you a wonderful harvest and a safe one, along with everybody else out there that's going to be listening. Boy, be safe. This time of year it gets hectic, and like you said, it's a very big chance of getting somebody hurt. So I do want to relay that out. Boy, be safe at harvest. Enjoy harvest. This is the report card for the whole year. And it's always one of my funnest time of year. It sounds like it's one of your funnest time of the year is to be able to see the crop come off the ground. So
yep, exactly.
But no, thank you very much, and we'd like to thank everybody that tuned in today for the Culture of Agriculture. Again, we'll catch up to you another day. Thank you.